13th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. I will call that meeting to order. And if our clerk could please do a roll call to establish a quorum.
Mary Ellen Ramstack.
Here.
Linda Waite.
Here.
Hugh Zettel.
Here.
Laird Salisbury.
Here.
Terry Riker.
Here.
Derek Daniil. Derek,
Can you hear us, Derek?
did you hang up? Okay. And Jay Hubner is excused.
I'm gonna raise his hand.
All right, and upon verification that our agenda was properly noticed, Amy,
The agenda has been properly noticed.
I am looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mary Ellen will move.
Second by
Laird.
Laird. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have adopted our agenda. Public participation, if you would please state your name.
Thank you,
All
Linda.
right.
I am Jim Mitchie. I reside full-time at 4159 Bayshore Drive in Sevastopol. As you know, I've had a continuous interest in the proposed ordinance regulating short-term rentals since last August and even longer. I, like I believe most others, support the need for STR regulation, but as you also know from my attendance here, I've struggled with the key decision about the 6-day minimum rental time. To crystallize my thoughts on the minimum rental time, I piggybacked on some of the fine work of Hugh Zettel of the Commission and developed a pro forma break-even analysis for both a 3-day and a 6-day rental policy. I submitted a short report on this analysis results, observations, and conclusions late last week. Either now or in the future, I'm happy to answer any questions about the work that was submitted. Like any pro forma analysis, the results are driven by expense and income assumptions, but I feel I included all the important aspects, and where decisions needed to be made, I made what I consider conservative decisions on assumptions. As you may suspect, this is not my first short-term rental pro forma analysis. For 10 years, I owned a beachfront property in North Carolina. 2002 to 2012, there we had a 6-day minimum rental policy, but occasionally rented for 3 days. Most of our rentals came from Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia, about 4 or 5 hours away. So I put together pro formas more detailed than this to track how we were doing and to guide us on prices charged and expenses. And I always thought about it in terms of how many weeks did I have to rent during prime season, which there is Easter to Columbus Day, to break even. And if I had other rentals, then that was profit. My purpose was to pay enough expenses to make the house a retirement location. That turned out to not be doable, and for those and other reasons, we sold that place and retired here in Door County. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing me here. So what did my Sevastopol STR pro forma analysis find, and what were the policy implications, which I did not write down in my submittal? First, while 6-day policy requires a bit greater occupancy, the challenge of covering all expenses or operating a true business with STRs is a real challenge. I learned that personally, and that's what the spreadsheet said. Second, if an owner is not trying to cover all expenses, make a profit, or cover the taxes, for instance, I found that there's enough wiggle room during the Memorial Day to Labor Day period, whether or not you have a 3 or 6-day policy. So it depends on their objectives. So to me, if the STRs are your kitchen table or real full-fledged business, then run it like a business by adjusting your marketing and financial policy to make it happen for a 6-day policy. It requires some rethinking about the marketing, but I think, in my opinion, the numbers show it can be done. I think that the proposed ordinance reasonably regulates what needs to be regulated for the sake of the residents and the other competing business owners, and that a 6-day minimum rental policy yields a market that is workable for covering enough expenses to make the effort worthwhile. If you're running a business, act like a business, adapt to the expenses, the market, and the regulatory climate in which you're operating. So now, after almost a year, I'm on the side of 6-day minimum rental. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We're glad you decided to retire in Door County. And just, you know, all of these submissions that we do get by email or dropped off with our town clerk, they are distributed to every plan commission member and every town board member. So those submissions are read by all of the members. Okay, anyone else? No. Okay. So I hope you've all had an opportunity to look at our minutes from our last meeting. Uh-oh, something
We lost
happened to
him.
Derek?
Yep, we lost him. It's okay. Keep going.
Fell asleep and hit the reset.
All right, we still have a
I
quorum
guess I
here.
put him to sleep with my little speech.
Previous minutes of February 23rd, 2021, you've all had an opportunity. I don't think there were any changes from Amy's last draft, so I'm looking for a motion to approve or accept and place on file.
I so move.
Laird,
Second.
second by Hugh. Any discussion, questions, concerns? All right, all those in favor of accepting the minutes of February 23rd, 2021, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right. So, on to our pending business, our short-term rental ordinance of residential dwellings, continued discussion and action to include a couple points there. So, on your desk, or at your desk tonight, was the previous draft with red line suggestions, and then also a final draft. So let's look at that first change, which was there were no changes to any of the definitions. That was a question. The only change was to section, help me out, Hugh,
We're in section 6E,
6E.
or excuse me, 6D, I'm sorry, 6D, item number 9,
Page 3.
on page 3.
Yes, on
Thank you,
page,
Mary Ellen.
there we go. Okay, so we previously had about an outdoor event lasting no longer than 1 day. There is, Door County in its comprehensive zoning ordinance does cover outdoor events. So again, we run everything past our attorney to make sure we're in line. And it was suggested that we just delete that first sentence because outdoor events would be controlled or under the auspices of the county zoning, and just put from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. quiet hours. So that was the only change from our previous draft. Any questions on that? Remember, we also, at our last meeting, we had a discussion about definitions, if we needed to be more specific of section 4, paragraph C, if we needed to be more specific of a residential dwelling. And again,
We
not
don't.
necessary.
Okay. On page 4, down on number 7, penalties, obviously, J and K are wiped out and A and B are
Right.
placed
It's
in,
formatting.
so. Okay.
Okay, so any questions on that? All right. Okay, looks good. And then, okay, so most of our public participation has dealt with the, and let's go to that section. It is section, where is our 6-night minimum? Okay, section 6, operation of short-term rental, subparagraph D, and then subparagraph parent 1. So right now, our ordinance states, no residential dwelling may be rented for a period of less than 6 consecutive nights. So I would like to ask our Plan Commission members, what is your interpretation of that 6-night minimum? Who would like to start?
We can start reverse alphabetical order, that's okay.
Reverse
Yeah.
alphabetical order, sounds good to me. Let's start with Z.
Is-
All right, Mr. Zettel.
I think the 6-night minimum, as I read it and seen it in other ordinances, is 6-night minimum is a 6-night minimum, which means that if you go to a VRBO or Airbnb site, and you look for properties that are available, you wouldn't see anything that requires a minimum of 3-night, or a minimum of 4-night, or a minimum of 5-night. You'd only see properties that were available 6 nights or more, okay? Implicit, right, so that's basically, 6 nights is 6 nights, so you're actually gonna basically stay at the venue for 6 nights. And obviously, a 6-night, also implies, a 1-week stay in general, right? When you go 6 nights, you depart the last day. So to me, 6 is 6.
Next. Larry?
Okay. I interpret that the same way that Hugh does, although I guess I also thought that if someone wanted to stay less than that, but that the property could not be rented for, less than, in other words, you couldn't have 2 rentals in a week. If somebody only wanted to use it for 3 nights, they could do that, but there's no way that, that somebody else then can come in the next day and stay for another 3 nights.
So more or less one stay within that
6
6-night
days,
period.
within the 6 nights. That's my understanding.
Right. And
Well,
we're advised to stay away from 7 consecutive days, because if you are renting for 7 consecutive days or more, you would not fall under the minimum then.
Right.
The state statute.
Okay, Mary Ellen?
Well, I do see it as Laird does. The turnover, whether they stay 3, 4, 5, or 6, it's 1 per 6. For instance, I don't know, start a rental on a Monday, and you're only gonna rent it or be there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You cannot do it again, offer it until the following night. So 1 per week, or per 6 day.
One stay per
Period.
6-night
nights.
period.
Yeah, I think, that's the way I see it, but I don't know, I guess I'm kind of thinking faster. I don't know if that needs to be more clear. I don't know that this is read, well, it can be interpreted full 6 days, or 1, it can be lesser nights, but within that 1 6-day period. So perhaps, should we decide or rewrite or something?
Maybe
I
this,
don't know. But that's the way I see it.
Terry?
The way it's written, I think it's pretty clear. It's really how Hugh interprets it, or how Hugh stated it there. Though I would certainly encourage discussion to clarify it so that it's could be interpreted less than the 6 days, but only 1 turnover in that 6-day period. But I think that if you're gonna agree that's how we'd like to see it, then it needs to be further clarified.
Clarified, yeah,
Right
that's the
there.
way I feel.
And that's why I sent out an email encouraging it.
Right, you had mentioned that previous in an email. And my thoughts are in that same vein. When I see 6-night minimum, I think of one stay within the 6-night period. So we would not be forcing a family to stay for 6 nights, but one reservation, one party, one group of guests within that 6-night period. And that 6-night period could be a Monday to Monday, it could be a Thursday to Thursday. I would like to know, now to Hugh's point about,
Don't forget
Don't
Derek.
get D.
oh, Derek, I'm
Derek.
sorry.
No, I
Is he-
couldn't get him back. I couldn't get him back.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
And I tried to text
okay,
him and
forget Derek.
Okay,
I
so
haven't.
Derek is excused.
yes.
So to Hugh's point, so if we all kind of think along the same lines, or most of us anyway, that it's one stay for 6 nights, how, and I'll ask Hugh this, how is Granicus, will they be able to monitor that by looking at the website? You know, they scrub these websites looking for guests. Will they be able to monitor, okay, this property, the rental started on Wednesday, so it expires the following Wednesday. Here's another property that starts Sunday to Sunday. Does the website have to say it's a minimum of 6 nights? Will people be confused by thinking that, well, we have to rent all 6 nights when actually they could only stay 3 nights if they wanted to? Do we want to set a minimum night stay, such as, in any event, it shall be no less than 3, consecutive nights? So those are all the questions that I think we need answers for before we clarify that language in our ordinance. So, Hugh, I guess maybe
Yeah,
that would be the,
it's an area that I've queried Granicus about, and I think what we might want to do is look at what some suggested language might look like, and then review with them relative to what they can do. For looking at any stay period, most of their analysis tools are pretty much all looking at it after the fact, right? It's tough to, because some people block off calendars just because they're using it for their own, personal use, that sort of thing. So it's tough to determine. So they'll look at other information that are on the website in order to discern, when did one stay start and when did another one begin. The other thing that they do is they do have the ability to log into some of these remote sites with the owner's consent if there is an audit or other activity that goes on. So with the STR owner, they can log on to their Airbnb or whatever, and they know what other information internally to that site that they can look at to verify how many stays. So if we wanted to do that from an audit perspective, we would have to make sure that we also have the language in the ordinance that from an audit perspective, we have the ability to do, if you will, an electronic query. So they have that ability. So that's another mechanism that they use to do verification from an enforcement perspective.
you had mentioned requiring the owner to list on the website that there's a 6-night minimum. But for someone looking for an Airbnb, and I see 6-night minimum, am I gonna see a calendar that says, okay, this party's coming in on Monday, July 1st, which means I can't book till Monday, July 8th? I think, if you require them to say it's a 6-night minimum on the website, that seems confusing, at least to me.
Well,
If I was looking for a
yeah.
place to stay, because I wouldn't know when
Right.
the week started.
That part is on the platform provider. So various platforms, VRBO, Airbnb, FlipKey, et cetera, they provide you tools relative to, how do you want to do your scheduling? Do you want to set up blocks? How do you make sure that if someone has a reservation, say where they didn't have a minimum, where they say, okay, I want to make sure I can maximize 4-day stays or 5-day stays. So as someone's trying to book, even though they have a 6-day period, say in the peak of summer, and someone wants to just book 2 days, you know, they can set up rules that say, for the month of July, I only want a minimum of 6, right? You know, for this period of time, I want to allow a minimum of 2 nights. So they can set up rules within a lot of the platform tools themselves relative to how do they make sure they could, for example, keep a 1-week buffer. So that's, you know, those are the kinds of things that are really on the platform side of an STR platform, not, you know, basically on the Granicus side.
And that would be the responsibility of the owner to communicate with
Correct.
their marketplace platform
Right.
that, okay,
They-
this is
they
what
have
I
to
need.
keep- They have to keep their calendar updated,
Right,
Correct.
and when you go on those sites, it'll also tell you when their calendar was last updated, and they will block out or filter, like you said, basically what they
Yeah,
want.
so some might be smart enough on the platform side to do it for the owner, but in other cases, it may have to be where the owner just has to be more cognizant of how they do their calendar management, to Chairman Wolfel's point.
but I'm thinking we would want the owner or the owner's agent or representative, you are ultimately responsible.
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
all right, so you said that we're having a telephone conference with.
Yeah, they're trying to get a time scheduled with they have an expert that has a lot of knowledge in of looking at of ordinances and, you know, making sure that you can, you know, maximize the ability to get the proper enforcement. So I think what we can do is, coming out of this meeting, if we want to clarify language, you know, we can clarify language and just say, okay, here's, you know, basically how we're establishing, you know, our minimum stay requirements, you know, what are the pluses or minuses, and be able to get their feedback.
You're having a Zoom with them next week or whatever?
I've asked them just to schedule some time for us,
Okay,
minimally you and I, to meet with them.
well, my question is, do we want to look for our attorney's opinion on clarifying that item? Or wait until we see what Granicus says? And also, do we want to talk about, you know, must they rent for a minimum of 3 nights? Or do we want to put that in the ordinance?
Well, I think what might be a suggestion, since you know, it sounds like there is a consensus at least that it's minimally talking about a 1 stay per week. Maybe, to Terry's point, it might be worthwhile to put the language in terms of kind of 1 stay per week.
I think
And,
that's the important part.
yeah, and,
Right.
and include a minimum, if we also want to put a minimum number of night requirement, we can have that in the language, and obviously there's wiggle room within there to determine, you know, how you want to set that.
If we don't address this, you're gonna have owners who are going to try and game the system, and if somebody wants to stay for 4 days, and we have a minimum of 6-day stay, they're gonna say, you know, they're just gonna adjust the rate for 4 days and put them down
Right,
for 6 days,
right.
and it looks like there's 6 days worth of rental where there's only 4. What we're trying to accomplish is high rate of turnover, limited, so rather than make them game the system, I think this would allow them a little more flexibility and make it a little more legitimate.
I think basically what we wanted the ordinance to say, we can decide whether we want a 3-night minimum. That's one point, but that it is, you know, 1 stay per,
For 6 nights.
for some nights. The subsequent rental shall not begin until 6 nights thereafter, or something like that.
Right.
So, let's see what Granicus has to say, and then if everybody's on the same page with, if we can have a consensus that whatever Granicus might respond with, and then we run that past our attorney for her to come up with appropriate language. And that would be, we would change the ordinance one more time to include that.
I just want to go back to what Hugh was saying about, the intent, I think, that we're getting here is one stay in a 6-night cycle, whether, and this to be determined, whether it's 3 nights or 4 or whatever, but the gist is to alleviate the merry-go-round, the
Yep.
turnover
Right,
over and so on.
exactly.
That's what we're trying to, I think that's the intent that most of us have. Now, and again, it will depend, I suppose, on Granicus. I'm a little hesitant on the, it's up to the owner to keep their calendar, and it's up to the marketplace place. Something's gotta be clear, because that, to me, is fraught for trouble.
Yes,
Um,
you're right, Mary Ellen.
There's got to
The
be
the monitoring.
the
point of it.
monitoring, yeah.
Right.
Um,
And like Hugh's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know, that's what I guess I'd like you to put across to them. Because perhaps everybody's 6-night period cycle starts on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Friday or a Wednesday. That can be,
Right.
Standard.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, when you look at the 6-night, if it was the true holistic 6-night for one set of guests, that's easier, if you will, if you're a neighbor trying to monitor that, right? Because I should only see these same cars in the week, or whatever. If it was one stay per week, it's, as a neighbor, if you're, concerned about, you got a couple sets of cars, one part of the week, and then that's a different audience, the rest of the week, and they don't know what that 1 week, what that interval is. We'll probably get more enforcement calls into the hotline relative to following up, so there'll be more, there may be more churn that way, and those are the kinds of things where, Granicus can give us their experience from having done this in, hundreds of municipalities, to kind of get their feel for what are the enforcement challenges, what do STR owners say, what do neighbors say, and see if they have any feedback relative to what it takes to enforce it, or what are the real life experiences from what they hear on their hotline and that sort of thing, just to kind of get that feedback.
Yeah, because that could be a real nightmare for everyone concerned.
Yes.
And like you said, Hugh, we probably won't learn it until after the fact, in which case they will get notification that, hey,
Right, and
it's been reported that you have
Correct.
more than one group of guests.
right, and I think those are the things that
Yep.
we'll see how, how do they look at their hotline feedback versus then what they see when they analyze, the data on the back end, and that's where they bring in their artificial intelligence and algorithms and that kind of stuff to kind of, raise flags that would then be reported to the town.
Linda, if I can. So, on this topic, one of the things that, I don't know where it is in the process, but one of the conversations we've had was, this would go into effect in July, but not necessarily in effect with the number of nights because of the monitoring or the booked vacations that are already on, the vacations that are already on the books. I said that backwards, right? We're thinking about that from an implementation standpoint,
We would have an effective date,
right?
and I guess once the effective date, once that comes around,
Yeah.
that's,
There'll be an effective date for reservations that are gonna be made on a go-forward basis. And I think we would establish a waiver for reservations that are already on the books up to a certain period of time. So
Okay,
for
that-
example,
Right.
we'd have to the town board may have to, have a final say on saying, okay, I'm gonna, if you will, allow a waiver for existing reservations through the end of
Okay,
the
I'm with you on
December
that.
December 31st, or through the end of the next
Right.
vacation
Whatever
calendar,
Whatever
it is.
that timeline is, regardless, July 1, Granicus starts to monitor what's happening in our STR base.
Right.
So over the course of the next 3, 4, 6 months, we will now build up a history of tracking on what the usage has been, right? They will track,
Minimally, yes.
okay. So we'll have a history, I mean, let's assume the waiver went to December 31st, whatever.
Yes.
We would then have an accumulated history under Granicus for that, whatever that period from implementation to whatever the stop date is.
Correct.
Okay.
So therefore, then the people who are renting, or the owner who takes the reservation, granted, we have a date, whatever it is again, December 31st or whatnot. The people that are there this year, because it's prior to December 31st, cannot reserve for the year after December 31st. Unless they go through the guidelines.
Right, well, I think the
You-
advice
okay.
was, just a delayed effective date,
Right,
not really waiving anything,
right.
because that
Whatever.
would be, why do the town board then would have to decide on a waiver, whatever. I think it would be that applicable for rentals starting after blank blank or effective as of, and then we would.
Right.
So the ordinance could go into effect,
July 1.
and then,
Right.
regard,
'Cause-
and then,
Because there are things independent of the reservation.
Right.
Things like, max occupancy for pouts and all those sorts of
Mhm.
things, parking, et cetera, that are kind of independent on whether I may have booked a reservation already. And I think existing reservations, it's a question of I honor those existing reservations, relative to this one stay per week for a certain period of time. And then anything, going forward after a certain date, they'd have to honor the one stay per week piece. All the other stuff,
it's
occupancy to match, pouts, that kind of stuff, that there's no.
That's
there's no-
July 1st.
There's no waiver on that.
Okay,
Because
it's just the
we can't,
length of stay.
right, we can't waive compliance to state law,
right.
which is,
Correct.
in a sense, what the pouts is.
So,
Right.
yeah, it could state that section D1 or whatever, effective as of blank, but, that doesn't preclude any of the other, like you said, the occupancy and the
It's a
number
non-severable
of,
type of
right,
deal.
that's totally different. This would
Mhm.
just be for that certain section, the effective date would be. Does that, help, Mr. Chairman? Does that help? Well, we still haven't
There's
answered
only-
the question, do we want a minimum night stay?
Well, you're not gonna have anybody stay for one night. I mean, no one's gonna pay a cleaning fee and stay for one night and leave unless every square inch of it.
There are places on the books, STRs on the books for one night.
Pricey little places.
Do we want a 3-night minimum? Is there advantage to having a 3-night minimum, or do we not have any minimum at all?
Well, if you do the 1 and 6 nights, although
I
you might have some too that are one-night stays, my guess is that number's pretty small in terms of people going in and out. If you do a 2-night minimum, which is fine, you have a weekend, you don't have an issue. If you do a 3-night minimum, then you have to decide that that's gonna require that additional night. What does that do to the weekend activity? I don't know.
But if it's one
The-
stay per week, if they wanna book their place for one night and it's vacant for 5 nights, I guess that's up to them, but that,
Pretty
I mean,
pricey option, but
economically,
yeah.
that would not make sense to the owner.
But that'd be up to the owner.
Right.
I mean, the only person that's gonna be happy with a one-night stay is gonna be the cleaning person.
Right,
Clean it before and clean it after, but
so are we saying we don't need a minimum night stay?
I'm trying to think of the advantages and the disadvantages to the whole neighborhood.
Right.
It's the same effect, because you're still talking about one stay and 6
Right.
nights. You know, you're not,
Right.
you've got somebody coming in during the 6 nights, whether they stay 1, 2, or 3 nights. It really doesn't make any difference. You're cutting down on the churn, which is what you're trying to
Well,
achieve.
Right.
Mhm.
That's a primary benefit, but there are other stakeholders that are full-time residents that will say, but for what the state law did, which disallowed me to exercise local zoning and not have these as businesses at all.
Right.
The 6 nights just said, it's a minimum of 6 nights, so you improve the quality of life because you don't have a business there, a quote-unquote business there, period. So that's that view as well.
I mean, I just came back from spending a month in Florida, and the house next to us, after 4 weeks, we were there, 5. In the last week we were there, unknown to us, there was a wedding on the Saturday of the last week we were there. Oh, okay, you know, and they partied and did their thing. And on Wednesday, there was another wedding. And on Friday, there was another wedding. So within 1 week, we had a churn of the place, and we had 3 weddings. And then we went and talked to the rental agent, who said, oh, it's an event house. And that's the way they promote it. So you want to, obviously, you want to avoid that. I don't care where you are. I mean, that was, you know, absurd. But one time, one wedding, we'd have lived with that. Well, we did. We lived with 3.
Well, I think if you go back too, when they first, when they first came about in 2017 in Act 59, the discussion was, you can rent your place for a week. They didn't say every other day, they said for a week.
Right.
And,
And I think that is
come
the
so far from the original intent.
little interpretation that a lot of, residential stakeholders is great.
Mhm.
They stay a week, they have to stay a week, not, I don't want them on the weekend, I don't want them, 3 days, 4 days, that sort of thing. That's where, if you look at, a lot of our letter feedback, was, for them, a week was a week, and if they can't rent it for a week, that's great, I've got peace and quiet in my neighborhood, right? So I think that's where we have to
A little bit
to
of
balance that. So
there.
I think that's
Right.
where
Yep.
having minimum night language allows us to dial that in if we need to change it over time, within the 1 stay per week, so that gives us flexibility depending on feedback we get.
Well, what do you mean by a minimum night stay? I mean, do you mean are you referring to the 1 time per 6 nights? Or
Yeah. per 6
determining what
Yeah.
the 1 stay should be?
No, within that 6 night minimum, within that 1 stay period, you could also say, okay, and you have to stay here a minimum of 3 nights,
Yes, you could.
or.
Is that what you're,
That's what I'm saying,
That's what we're asking.
depend, right,
Right.
because you could, based on, if as you go forward, if you get a lot of feedback saying, hey, I still, this is still impacting my quality of life, you can say, okay, then we'll increase the minimum nights within that stay period so that you get less casual traffic, so to speak. So you have we had that flexibility, as I say, dial that in one way or the other based on whether or not,
An experience.
on our experience with it.
but you're basically saying, I think, if I understand it, that you would like to have a minimum stay within
The 1 stay per week.
the 1 stay per week or per
Correct.
6 days.
Correct. There are some people that voiced a lot of concern about, in the early discussions of which, some people in the audience remember, was, I don't want, these weekend, I don't want these weekend party houses, because it gets a different clientele than, people that stay, or families that stay for an entire week. So if you have a minimum night requirement, you may dissuade, that sort of activity, in your neighborhood. So I think that's where we have that flexibility to put a minimum night requirement in there if we choose to do that.
But you also have a solid ordinance So you can approach it too from a walk versus run approach, because the components of the ordinance that you've put in place or about to put in place cover the, private wastewater, covers the Bill of Rights of the renter, covers all these other secondary, they're not really secondary, but,
Important.
issues that are important that need to be and should be licensing, et cetera, et cetera. So you can put into effect whatever, 1 stay in 6 days or whatever. You have tracking for some period of time that you can evaluate that, or you can gain feedback through the tracking mechanism that says this isn't working. And the ordinance can stand at its face value because there's nothing wrong with all the components of the ordinance, and you can modify the state. So, you could come back here in April of next year and say, hey, this isn't working, we need to go to this, or is,
Right.
And the same thing, I'm jumping ahead of you here, but the same thing goes when we talk about fees. We don't know where we stand in terms of the actual cost, and we want to operate on a cost-only basis with the fees. We're not in a profit business here. So, you might look at that and say after a year, well, we didn't have much enforcement, so you can tweak that through a resolution. So that's just,
Right.
for whatever.
Which is why we put it in a separate,
Right,
uh,
exactly.
So-
type of thing,
So we
but-
could, we could just do the, ask for the appropriate language to reflect 1 stay within a 6-night period. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
regardless of the length of the stay. Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
whatever the attorney advises for language. So one.
Because I mean, there just seem to be two things going on here,
Right. So we won't include the minimum night stay for now. It'll be 1 stay
One stay
in a 6-night
in a
period.
6-day period.
Yeah. And then our chairman just talked about the fees. And I know Hugh had done the analysis of why we set our fees. And like Mary Ellen said, it would be a separate resolution so that if it did need to be modified, we don't have to redo the entire ordinance. We just change, or ask the town board to change the resolution. So right now, we have the initial license fee at $500. We have the renewal at $350. And I'm not sure if I can easily find the metrics that you had out for that, Hugh. But I know a good portion of that was if we need enforcement.
Correct.
Granicus, I'm gonna estimate, it was between 8 and 9,
Yeah.
so let's just say 10 to round it off. Paperwork and, administration and all that. The fee must be consistent with the actual cost. We can't make a profit on this. And then, I know there was some discussion or some feedback on why is the renewal fee so high at $350? And there again, maybe it doesn't have to be that high. Maybe we can be hopeful that things will run smooth,
Right.
and that could be adjusted
I-
downward, or
right.
maybe the 500 is gonna cover everything that, could
Right.
go down.
I think the biggest thing, and I don't have that language in front of me, but I think the biggest thing is the resolution. Maybe we need to tweak the resolution, or maybe that's something that's put in an FAQ relative to the fact that we can only charge actual costs,
Yep.
right? I mean, that's state
Right.
law. And I know there's been a lot of feedback saying, hey, the town is just looking at this as a money-making initiative. We did our best efforts to both estimate as well as get feedback from municipalities that have implemented it. We talked about Walworth County being one, town of Rome, which is also using Granicus. That's where we got estimates from them saying, hey, don't use this feature. After 1 year, we learned that it wasn't worth it, right? So that's, okay, it's a way we can save money. So that's kind of incorporated in that thought process. And I think as we go forward, probably the biggest wild card is depending on what we need to do for any sort of manual enforcement activities to follow up with what we learned from Granicus. Or, labor that's associated with helping, Amy bootstrap, the application registration process, that sort of thing. Because I think that's part of where that FTE cost you know, will come into play, it's just as you ramp it up, since, you know, it's just,
Well, all we have right now is the estimate of all the figures Linda
Right,
just
and-
mentioned, up, rounding it off to 10.
I did find that too.
Right, and so,
Right,
you know, we do our best. This is what we see right now, but it could be adjusted.
and as we talked about, I think Walworth County in year one of their ordinance, I think 2017 is when they started, or 2018, their initial was $900.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then based on their learning, a lot of it was relative to their, they had an FTE and a half of enforcement. They did more manual enforcement. They didn't have a tool like Granicus. And so their fee went down to 600, and a lot of that was just reduced labor, you know, which is gonna be the wild card.
I'm just shooting off the top of my head here, but if the committee were to come back to us at some point in time with a recommendation for implementation date and/or a waiver period, however, whatever that means to you guys, that would also determine how much of a period where you're really not gonna have a huge enforcement issue, if that makes sense. So the first year, enforcement might actually be less. I don't know. It
because we
just-
don't know what we're dealing with.
Correct. So, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. So I guess what I'd say is maybe give that a little thought and come back after all of this stuff is done, when we finally get into May, with a recommendation for an implementation or waiver or combination. And do we want to revise the fees based on whatever, or keep them, and what's the logic? And adjust them as needed based on our experience, because that's really what's gonna happen. We know X amount of this is going out the door no matter what, but then the variable cost is what we have to try and factor in.
But we won't know until after we get some time under our belt.
I agree,
Yeah.
but I don't wanna,
The-
I don't wanna be the, I don't wanna hold everybody's money and then a year later go, you know, we overcharged you, and so we're gonna give you a break, year two's free, or, you know, I'd like to try and thin that down. Something that's realistic and not, I don't wanna end up out of pocket on it, but I don't wanna end up with my pockets full either,
Right.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, I think there's two wild cards, right? One is the labor, the FTE piece
Right,
relative to enforcement, and then the other wild card, I think, is gonna be whatever our budget that we have in there currently for legal fees.
yeah.
So,
Oh, and we certainly tap
I'm
that,
just saying that might, from a contingency perspective, I think,
and potential help or assistance and.
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's where that other FTE is to
Right.
help
Right.
in ramping that up.
Okay,
Yep.
well,
Yeah.
that's fine, I leave it in your trusting hands.
Yeah, in that initial cost estimation, Hugh, you covered anything and everything. So, and that was nearly
Well, the
$30,000, so.
he has a company car in there?
No,
Put that in, okay?
I took that out, that was
Country
actually,
club membership.
that was actually the Walworth County's estimate, because they, you know, had basically feet on the street that would go to all these
Wow.
places in their county, and so they had a car,
Yeah.
or two cars for the, you know, retired sheriff's deputies that they used to do the enforcement.
of course, the thing, some of those that we've studied have been county-oriented versus a
Right.
town orientation, so.
Correct.
there's-
Well, now, the Granicus, we started with 63 rentals, and now I think we had 5 new permits in less than a month.
Yeah, the current active STRs, from looking at the latest data and what we got from the Door County Tourism Zone, it's gone from 64, which we reported at the February town board meeting, it's now 70.
Yeah,
And, you know, that, you know, of course, that may change, you know, again, you know, as we said back in February, you know, Granicus may find more. But I think we had up to 70-some in the estimate, so it's,
Yeah,
I think we're still within the range.
so, well,
okay.
and like we said, you know, it is a separate resolution, so the board could certainly, you know, address that if we,
Okay.
or we, like I said, adjust to hopefully be more conservative. All right, are we done with the ordinance part?
So can we just recap what's gonna
Okay.
happen now with this, with the 6 night?
Recap, we're going to reach out to our attorney
Okay,
and,
of who's gonna
say
get,
that, you know, our intent is one stay
mhm,
in a 6-night period, how best to state that.
okay,
And so we will redo the ordinance once we get that response. And I'm guessing that will probably be the ordinance then that will be addressed at our public hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
We won't be making any last
Okay.
minute change.
Everybody's okay with that?
yeah,
Yep.
I just,
Okay, tweaking it per our attorney's recommendation to that one section.
Okay.
With these other this one sentence deletion that we talked about earlier. Okay?
Question or clarification, so there will not be a minimum stay time, perhaps in a separate resolution?
Perhaps, well, it looks like we're not going to include that now, Jim.
I'm just
But not
wanting
to
to be
say
clear.
that, you know, if it doesn't work, if things aren't going the way we anticipated, maybe we need to amend the ordinance
just-
somewhere down
Just
the
want to
line.
know what,
Yeah, amend just that one section. Is that the understanding of
it's
everyone?
still unclear to me.
Okay.
I guess maybe I'm not wording it right. I'm kind of with Jim on this. There's 2 things going on. And the one is that our intent is one stay per 6 nights.
Correct.
Are you then, or are we, or whatever, considering saying that, but that one stay must be a minimum of 3 days?
That's what we were
That's
talking
what's on,
about.
that's what's on the table,
Yeah,
is do you,
that's what's
do we,
on the
do
table.
we wanna,
Okay.
do we wanna put a minimum?
Could be 3, could be 0,
Right, correct. But
Could be
what-
one.
could be 1.
Is that the information that you're gonna solicit you from Granicus?
No,
or is your-
Granicus isn't gonna care about that. I think it's a
Okay.
question, do we want to, you know, this is from, you know, my comments about, for the full-time resident stakeholders that thought 6 was 6.
Mhm.
It could be the fact that you could still have your weekend partiers every weekend, if you
Okay.
will, because that's just,
Okay.
that's
So
just a
there's really
two-night stay.
2 questions you're asking the attorney then, Linda.
Right,
Is one, how, we're looking at one stay per 6 night,
right.
period. And then, what?
And then, do we want to establish a minimum
Within that time frame.
within that time frame,
Right.
correct, Terry?
Well,
Yeah.
our attorney will say, that's up to you.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
That's right.
we're not getting anywhere.
Well, I thought you were at the point where you had one stay
Per
in
6
6 days, period.
Regardless, if it's
Right.
1 day, 2 days,
Well,
3
it's
days.
up to whatever,
Yeah.
you know, but you're gonna get one turn of that property in a 6-day time frame.
Right, that's what I thought first, but then we were throwing in the 3-day thing and I was getting a
Well,
little,
Yeah, we had previous discussions.
okay, that's
Yeah.
passed. So we're looking at, until we know better or get some experience with
Right.
this, we are looking at one stay per every 6 days.
Yep.
Regardless
Right.
of the length of the stay.
Right, so
Right.
if they wanted to come for just Friday
Yeah.
and Saturday night, I guess that would be to the residents' benefit. They know it's gonna be quiet for the next 5 days.
Right,
Okay, so.
okay, so
that's
we're,
what- one
that part's
stay,
off the board.
6-night period.
You
It
okay
was
with
just
that?
I was getting a little all
All
kinda
right.
jammed in the
Didn't-
bath
So
here.
we'll get
Pandora's
some
box,
language
but-
from the attorney, and once
Okay.
we have that final draft of an ordinance,
Mhm.
we'll get it out to everybody.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it now, but it was,
You okay with it?
oh yeah, I'm fine with it.
All right, the public, are we ready to move on?
No, I think,
Oh.
I think there's some more relative to, you had mentioned, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, a waiver or effectivity, is that, I'm assuming that's another action that you want the
Well, it
plan
doesn't
commission? to-
necessarily have to be now, but, I'm ahead of myself again, so I apologize. But after the hearing, I hope that you guys will have a meeting to digest the hearing stuff and any additional things. Like, you get all done and it's like, oh man, we can't touch the pet thing. I don't care what it is, but, right? So after the hearing, you guys have a meeting, you now digest what came in, and you make recommendations, changes, or you leave it as is, whatever the case might be. And then after that, you would come to the board meeting, or Linda would, as with your recommendation, you'd say, hey, we're good to go on this, we're gonna change the pet thing, and we want this to be implemented July 1st, and by the way, we're gonna give a waiver for reservations that are good through X, so that, you know, the people that, and we went through this with the room tax many, many years ago, where we fought through the issue of room tax because people had booked reservations in advance, no different than you or I do when we make a vacation destination plan. So would look to have some recommendation on that, and then with that would be, okay, I think the fees are good, or we're gonna tweak them up or down, and then it goes to the board, and then they support all of that stuff, I hope, and we move on. That's the theory, it doesn't necessarily have to work.
And again, it would be, you know, the ordinance is gonna be effective such and such, and section D is gonna be effective December 31st or whatever.
So we do that after the public hearing.
Sure, we can reach out to the attorney one more time.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless you have some verbiage you wanna try, I mean, we can certainly run it through ahead of her, but I'm not anticipating there's gonna be huge tweaks to it. You know, from what because you've all heard input, we've all heard input from everyone on this topic, but it should hopefully be something minor that we're gonna change this, or we wanna alter that, or change the hours, so it's something, you know, we can.
Yeah, effective date would probably be, and do have some suggested meeting dates here too, so. So keep in the back of your mind, effective date.
Yeah.
And maybe that section will have a different effective date than the rest of the ordinance. Good on, everybody good on that, on the ordinance portion? Mr. Chairman, okay? All right, so also at your desk, you saw the notice for the public hearing. So, with the agenda and the notice of the public hearing and the draft, maybe after your draft ordinances.
Yep.
There you go. Okay, so, we worked with the chairman on this. This will be, what will be published in the paper. So again, rather than reading that whole thing, we have sort of, the next page is sort of an agenda, but we're not gonna call it an agenda, we're gonna call it, you know, our conduct of business or process or whatever. So it'll be, for the public hearing, it'll be called to order. We'll recite the public hearing notice, why we're here. Town of Sevastopol residents will have the opportunity to speak first. It will be limited to 3 minutes. And the purpose, this is the main thing here, is the purpose is for gathering information only. There won't be any discussion among individuals, the planning commission, or the town board. So strictly, we're here to listen and take notes and see if we've missed anything. And then per Laddie's recommendation and Derek's, make sure that they come to the podium, use a microphone because it will be going out on YouTube and our live channel. And maybe we can have some kind of disinfecting thing or whatever, I don't know.
We'll work on
For the
that.
microphone, yeah.
It will be live.
Yep. All right, so we'll go over the guidelines, and then we'll open the public hearing, and then there'll be an adjournment.
Can I-
If you look at the
Can
notice.
I ask a question?
Yep.
Sorry, just on that. Is there, are Town of Sevastopol residents and Town of Sevastopol property owners one and the same?
No. So I think it will be if you're a qualified elector, which means you're eligible to vote in the town of Sevastopol, makes you a resident.
Okay, that might be worth noting.
Well, if you look at the
somewhere.
notice.
It does, okay.
Yep. And
Notice
this
does
was-
that? Awesome.
Yep, this was Amy's idea, so we're strongly suggesting that people sign up ahead of time with our clerk. So she'll maintain a list, and she'll go through that then and kind of decipher out who's a resident, since she knows everybody in the town, like I do, who's a resident, and hopefully we can kind of put them into some time slots, if that works. Maybe it won't work, but,
We're only gonna have roughly, right, 25 chairs only in here, spaced. And we're gonna hopefully communicate as much of this as possible in advance, but it's input only, not discussion. So you can come in, say your piece. You know, obviously you and we have all heard all the pluses and minuses, so we're looking for a different approach if there is one, or different feedback, not just I'm opposed, I'm opposed, I'm opposed. And ideally, we will hopefully drive people in and out. In other words, I'll come in, I'll speak, I'm a resident, I'll leave the building, and 2 or 3 other people can come in or whatever. We're not knowing how many people we're gonna get. But I suspect, in addition to what we're get here, we're gonna get a TV station or a radio station or 2. So, you know, we'll wanna try and have an even flow, people allowed to make their comments, leave the building, and then you guys will have your meeting after that to digest what they have, and then the following week it'll end up with the board with what we hope to be the final, and let them do whatever they wanna do.
and there again, we can repeat that, okay, each and every email, submission, written comments, or whatever that we've received for the past 2 years has been distributed to everyone. Hopefully, we won't have a lot of repetition, the same comment over and over, but that would be too hopeful, I guess. So we'll just see. All right, so any questions on that? So I hope you can all make it, Tuesday, May 11th, right here at the town hall. 5:30 we're starting.
Anybody
Oh.
see any problems with any of this at this juncture, the hearing itself, any concerns? We will be getting bulletproof shields for each of you, that will be in front.
And there again, written comments and concerns can be submitted in writing too. You
Yeah,
know, for someone who doesn't want to appear, you can send an email or whatever.
So if we get a list, and Amy, we have enough opportunity, she'll try and inform the people that day that you're number 30 on the list, 3 minutes apiece. Anticipate you don't need to be here, and, you know,
Hour
unless
and
you
a half.
wanna sit in the 25 seats for an hour, hour and a half. We could do overflow again, if the saloon is interested, we can broadcast it down there. We will have either the sheriff or fire department, one or the other will come just to make sure we don't have a COVID overflow, so that I don't want to put anybody at risk, either in the audience or on the board. So we'll have somebody there to help monitor the flow of traffic, so to speak. I mean, it could be very, very similar to the quarry, you just don't know.
is this technically a plan commission meeting, or is it both the plan commission and the town board that will be?
No, this is strictly a plan commission public hearing on the ordinance. If there are town board members here, they will only be here to listen, not respond. We decided not to have the town's attorney here because it's just gonna be information gathering until this all settles down. So hopefully that'll make the flow, we don't get into a back and forth
Right.
banter.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm just wondering if there are some opportunities at the town board meeting or ahead of the public hearing to do some FAQs as far as things, that we're still getting emails where things are mischaracterized, saying, oh, this is gonna affect hotels and resorts, or what about my,
We have
You
it
know-
I have it on the agenda for Monday.
so,
It's my intention to just address the highlights of the ordinance and, whatever that,
Right.
we end up with here. If there's some things that you want, I'll be happy to take 2 minutes and do it, because the more that we communicate ahead of time, the less
right.
issues we're gonna have the day of the hearing.
And that's where, just some of those misconceptions that, oh, this is what is this gonna do to hotels, because I think they're subject to this ordinance, or, just clarifying, saying, hey, the town is forbidden by law, we can't, this is not a money-making venture,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah,
just,
if you wanna give me what you think might be the top 5 or whatever, I'll be happy to.
because that way we can at least,
Go ahead.
try to get those communicated out, so
Right.
that'll just
Yeah.
reduce the,
I mean, and I don't think, everybody here had somewhat similar but different opinions. I think the short-term rental community, to a large degree, perceives this ordinance as a 6-night minimum, period. I either rent for 6 nights or I can't rent at all.
Right.
That's it. And although we have talked about different variations of that over time, like tonight, my intention will be on Monday to address that again, to try and communicate out where it's tracking, you know, so we can reduce some of the angst that's out there or that would normally be vented here, you know, on May 11th or 12th, whatever.
And I think the thing that has often been forgotten, or the full extent of the ordinance, is short-term rentals in a residential dwelling. That little part always seems, anyway, in my opinion, to get lopped off quite a bit. And hence a lot of the, oh, you're doing away with my business, or this or that or the other. It's trying, our challenge has been to try to find a balance
Right.
between those who wish to rent out their homes and those who have bought their homes or built them or whatever to live in. And that, you know, it's not that you're, you know, shooting down some hotel down on, in the back 40. That's not the point. It's a neighborhood.
You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I had a thought the other night, and thank God the thought left me. But it was along the lines of, you know, you could have two versions of this. You could have a version that says if you're in a commercial district, then, you know, it would be a different story. Thankfully, most of our short-term rentals are not in a commercial district. Or if you had somebody in a farmette in, you know, the edge of Egg Harbor and Jackson, I mean, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But we're dealing with residential communities for the most part. And,
Well, I
and
think
that's a different.
that was the point of the concern about the leak, or the leak of
Right.
the letter from Amy Sullivan. What we wanted to do, or our thought was, is to
Right,
denote a residential SF20 zoned area versus an agriculture, like, for example, the Estes.
Yep.
They're on Bechtel Road in the, you know, in a
Estes
in a
could have a
rural.
party at night, it wouldn't bother anyone in the
Yeah.
world.
The
except
next door
them.
neighbor is 40 acres, you know, 40 acres away.
Yeah.
And so, by trying to identify the SF20 in the residential zoned areas,
We just dug ourselves a hole.
you know, it would have given us flexibility, quite honestly. But since we're under county zoning, we don't have the authority to,
Right.
Yeah.
to fine tune that. So until the county,
Well, and like
Does
I
that,
always
then we can't.
have said to people, I never had children, and yet I have paid school taxes my entire tax-paying life. Is that fair to me? You know?
Yes.
Not too late.
You know, it just,
okay.
Yeah, the legality was questioned last
Yeah,
meeting,
I
and we should
remember
have
that.
clarified it then. We, like Hugh said, we were looking at just saying in certain zoning districts, but
Right. And
our
that-
attorney responded with, since we're under county comprehensive zoning, we are not gonna be a zoning authority,
Right.
thus we could not reference
Right.
correct.
zoning, and that was strictly what that memo
Was about.
Yep.
was about, that we,
Yeah, she's kept us,
Yeah.
she's caught us at a few
yeah, she's
places,
Yeah.
which is good.
definitely, that's what we're here for.
Could I
Okay.
make a comment
Oh,
about the
Jim,
May
did you have
11th
a-
meeting?
Okay, I'm sorry, Jim, what?
Could I make a comment about the May 11th meeting? As I heard it,
Oh, sure.
we're going to be having people cycling through, and if you want to watch the rest of it, go to the internet.
Yeah,
I think you need to accommodate people who will say that they don't have the internet. It sounds crazy, but I'm running into this a lot, that my connection is so poor, or et cetera, et cetera. So some alternate site.
I think we
Here.
did the Institute Saloon with the quarry hearing, and we could probably arrange to do the same thing.
Because I think you'll get people that say, I don't have internet at home, and I'm gonna camp out and back here.
And they can share a parking lot too.
That worked pretty well last time, and Laddie, you had mentioned that as well, about getting in touch with them ahead of time,
Right.
if that's still,
I think we can pursue that, and, because
Between
if we go
Larry.
through the numbering, you know, who's speaking wherever, they can go over there if they want and watch if they want. And, I mean, there can be some people that won't leave no matter what, but ideally, they'll flow through rather than wait for a hearing conversations or a discussion. So,
Yeah, I think that once it's clear that there is no discussion, you're gonna eliminate some of the people that wanna,
Right.
have a back and forth.
banter back
You
and
know,
forth.
to that, you know, you've seen all the correspondence, and there's some really bizarre beliefs on this ordinance that are totally not true. You're gonna see statements that are gonna be made that, you know, totally contradict what's in here. Do we attempt to clarify that, or do we just not do anything? I mean, they're gonna say things that just, either they don't understand it, or they're just gonna say something that is untrue about the ordinance. Do we explain that, clarify it, or do we just, how do we handle it?
Well, could we, just an idea, put out a Q&A, or not a Q&A, a fax, what am I trying to say?
FAQ.
FAQ, yeah.
Thank you, yes. Of saying, well, we hear blah, 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 blah. Well, that's not the case. Here's the answer. In the clarity, you know, after the fact. I don't know.
Even if you do that, but it's still gonna be
Well,
at the
nobody will.
meeting, there's gonna be a bunch of those that come in, and I guess the question is, do we just ignore them, or how do you?
well, I think you've gotta ignore them, Terry, because, one, if you try to defend it, who's gonna be the spokesperson?
And then you get the back and forth started, and
You
then,
start the banter back and forth, and it'll be endless, and I've sat through enough RPC hearings. I mean, they let people come up and discuss their position. The RPC does not come back and
Right.
say this is right or wrong. They close the hearing, they have their discussion, and that'll be what you'll do the next time.
We need,
And you have to rely upon the fact that you know what the ordinance intent is and how it's supposed to work. And even if somebody stands up and is completely off base,
Yeah, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But that individual is gonna leave, thinking the same way he
Misinformed.
did when he got here versus possibly us.
I'm gonna guess that
Clarify.
in some cases, there'll be side chit chat where someone will say, you know, that's on the money or off the money, or not important. But if we get into the back and forth,
Just
we
gonna
might as
extend it
well,
out to.
might as well bring in dinner
Right.
twice.
then we have a free-for-all.
Right.
And if we start responding to one, then everyone will,
And that's why I
I
decided not to
prefer to
bring the
just
attorney in,
keep it.
because
yeah.
people would then take the opportunity to address her and say, well, this isn't legal.
Sure.
We know what's legal, so, you know, we'll just deal with it.
You know, and that's, I guess that's their privilege to state what they feel, so.
Unless you personally would like to do all of it.
Maybe
which
you
case
could
we'll
go
make
over
an
to the
exception.
saloon after Terry.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, I'll go along
so-
with your idea, it's good.
All right, if you think there's something, everybody okay with that notice then?
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, this is going nicely. Future agenda items will be, of course, the ordinance. So next meeting date. So I think we could cancel the April 27th Plan Commission meeting. And please put on your calendar, of course, the public hearing then on May 11th, right here, 5:30. And then we were thinking of having a plan commission meeting right after, or that same week. So if the public hearing is Tuesday, the 11th, are you available Thursday, May 13th, to hash over comments and anything that we need to address in follow-up to the public hearing?
It's okay with me?
Yeah, seems.
Thursday, May 13th at 5:30 will be our next
Okay.
meeting. So take April 27th off your calendar, please. All right. And we would make a recommendation, I think, to the town board. I think we would be to that point. The town board meets on Monday, May 17th. Or their next meeting is Monday, June 21st. Sound okay?
May want to put the alternate site, if we do that on here. Viewing, you know, if somebody wants to view it.
Oh, for viewing.
We'll put it somewhere, so maybe when we post this.
On the public notice. Okay.
That would be part of the public notice then?
And maybe the public notice.
Alternate site for viewing purposes
Yeah,
only?
if somebody wants, yeah, something along those lines.
Just so they don't all go to the saloon?
That's fine too. In which case Terry will go over there and answer all of their questions.
For a fee, right, for a drink.
Okay,
beer
per
have we missed anything then?
I'm good.
All right, thank you all again.
Now that I got my
Jeannie,
dates squared away.
Larry, Derek, Jim for coming out tonight, Chairman. All right. Hugh, did you have-
I, make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, okay.
Second?
Second, Terry? All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.